Broadcast by Mr. Deepak Vohra, who is the former Secretary of the Ministry of External Affairs. Mr. Vohra, thank you so much for joining me. We just heard Igor Polika over there. He's talking about the casualty figures, which might just go beyond 150. And he also says the situation has become more and more serious as missile attacks have been reported early this morning. It's about 9:30 a.m. in Ukraine right now, and this is the situation currently.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to be with you, learn from you. And I've heard the report as well as what my colleague, the ambassador of Ukraine in New Delhi, has said. I wouldn't expect him to say anything else. The fact is that the situation is serious. There have been casualties. There has been an attack. And from what I can make out based on my knowledge of this country, which I've been to, the Ukrainian military is not in a position to defend the capital, Kyiv. In fact, I would use even stronger language in saying it's only a matter of time before they actually crumble. I've seen this before. Now, I was looking at visuals of Kyiv also, a city that I'm familiar with. The destruction is horrific. It appears that missiles have been launched. And when a missile hones in on its target and explodes, it's no excuse, but it's very difficult to ensure that there are no civilians in the area. We've seen this in the past in many countries. They try to protect their military assets by surrounding it with citizens and with non-combatants, with ordinary people. I'm not saying that they're doing this in Ukraine, but we've known. So this is what very cynically some people call collateral damage. There should be no damage at all. There should be no loss of human life. But this is an accepted fact of international life. What I'm looking to see, ma'am, and try to understand is why this situation has reached this particular level. In the 30 years since the collapse of the former Soviet Union, Russia did not invade any country. America, Panama, Iraq, Bosnia, Haiti, Kosovo, Yemen, Afghanistan, Somalia, Libya, Syria, these are some of the invasions. Who sanctioned the United States? Tuvalu or Nauru? Nobody did. You know, in any war, ma'am, and I've been through many, truth is always the first casualty. Everyone and his grandmother is rushing to sanction Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. Well, that's what they think they can do because they're not able to take on the Russian military on the ground. So it's trying to freeze their access to the Western financial system. And if they go around curtailing Russian access to SWIFT, which is the interbank financial transfer system, that will be very, very serious. Then they are really shut out of the global financial system. I know the case of Iran, who suffered very, very badly as a result of this. However, one thing has to be remembered, ma'am, and I say this with considerable caution, that when push comes to shove, and if the people of Russia begin to suffer when they can't access their funds, etc., as the people in Ukraine are not able to do apparently, then they tend to unite and hit back at who they perceive to be the oppressor. This is not a time to say galti iski hai ya galti uski hai. The fact is, if the ordinary people hurt, as we are seeing in many, many countries, even now, including Afghanistan, then they turn around and say, well, guys, the government is pretty rotten. And they'll turn around and say that we are being unfairly targeted, and they rally around the government.
Right. Mr. Vohra, there are very important points that you've made. I will actually go to the emotional appeal and also the speech that Mr. Zelensky really made. And he has mentioned that Ukraine has been left to fight alone. As you mentioned, sanctions and all sanctions is the Western countries that are talking about. No action really on ground. This is what they have been saying and they continue to say. They will obviously hide behind the fact that Ukraine is not a member of the NATO and hence that action cannot be taken. There'll not be troops on the ground. What really happens then, and how effective will these sanctions be for against Russia? Because we do have to also, mention the China factor here. That is completely backing Russia.
I sometimes refer to these, ma'am, in a moment of facetiousness as sanctimonious sanctions. Effectively, Russia has been undergoing sanctions for a long time. They've learned to deal with them, to live with them, as Iran has. We did too. When we carried out our nuclear tests in 1998, the Americans promptly imposed sanctions on us. Took a while till 9/11 happened, and then we became lovey-dovey with them again, and they removed the sanctions when they wanted our help. So what is happening in the present case, ma'am, is that You are very rightly pointed out, since Ukraine is not a member of NATO, therefore Article 5 of collective defense does not kick in. It has been invoked only once in NATO's history, and that was when 9/11 happened and Allied aircraft were patrolling the skies. You might recall, you're probably too young to recall, that the American Air Force plus all American civilian planes had been grounded because they didn't know which one might crash next into a building. So it was Allied warplanes that were patrolling American skies. I was there in 9/11 in 2001, so I know what happened. So therefore, ma'am, what is now going to happen is that they will intensify their sanctions. That's all that they can do at this time. There will not be boots on the ground. I say it with cynicism that the European militaries leave out the UK and probably France. These are all 9 to 5 militaries. They really don't. I've dealt with them in the Sudan, in South Sudan. They really don't know how to fight. They are no match for us, no match for the Russians. So if this is now going on, the Russians are fighting. Now there'll be all kinds of opinion polls by Western news channels. Fortunately, you are not one of them, where they'll say, oh, 95% of Russians now oppose the invasion, or 65% or 22%, and they'll quote all kinds of figures which are conjured out of a hat. Nobody has the time to go around doing a Gallup poll or a straw poll at this point of time in Russia. China, you mentioned. It's very, very interesting. Because as you know, that the gas deal of the century was $400 billion signed 5 or 6 years ago for the Power of Siberia pipeline to take Russian gas to China. And now they've just signed a second one, Power of Siberia 2, which is also going to take Russian gas to China. China is delighted it's getting gas, clean gas, at an affordable price. Whereas Germany, which was hoping that Nord Stream 2, the second pipeline that was going to be built towards Germany, bypassing Ukraine, would bring gas to Germany, Russian gas. Now, why would it bypass Ukraine? Again, we tend to forget 2018. I think the Russians told the Ukrainians that you are scoundrels, you are cheating, you are pilfering my gas, you are drilling holes in the pipeline and stealing my gas. So therefore, they want to avoid the Ukraine altogether. Ukraine is not going to get any transit fees. This is the reality, the hard reality. Whether it's right or wrong, I don't know. But this is the excuse that was used when they decided to build Nord Stream 2 parallel to Nord Stream 1 through the Baltic, bypassing Ukraine. So Ukraine will be hit. They will not get any transit fees. It used to be up to $1 billion. China will get cheap gas. Where China might be hurt is if the European Union imposes trade sanctions on them. China is the largest trading partner for many of the European nations, including Ukraine. They might then turn around and say, buddy, since you are supporting this character called Putin, we don't like you and we're going to impose many more sanctions. And I can tell you what China's response will be. Oh, ha, so what's new? Let's have another vodka. That's really what's going to happen.